So
Hello.
we've got our last presentation here before lunch, and we have Drew Carlton, who's the manager of Forest Health for the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development in New Brunswick, giving a complimentary update to what Rob just presented.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here and hope that it runs smoothly. Let me know if that's pops up for you now.
Yep, we're seeing it fine.
And there you, okay.
Yep, you're all set. Thanks, Drew.
Okay. So, the unfortunate thing about a meeting like this being virtual is obviously I don't get to be there and interact with folks. But the nice kind of trade-off is while I'm listening to the talks going on in the room, I'm actually modifying and updating my presentation to make sure there's no overlap and that it kind of gels a little bit better with what you've heard from the three previous speakers. So hopefully I'll be able to maintain your interest levels and give you a little bit of different information and visuals as it relates to the EIS program. To begin with, and I think this has been kind of hammered home by Rob, but certainly, we want to think about the EIS. The borders don't really matter to the insect, and so what's really relevant to what's happening with populations is really where these feeder populations are coming from. This is the Quebec data from this past year, so the 2023 their defoliation surveys, and what you see on the left is the map showing sort of the intensity and where their outbreaks are right now. If you were to look at the previous half dozen years of their defoliation maps, they actually look a little bit more intense, in particular in 2020. And you can see from the graph on the right hand side that at least to date that the peak of the defoliation in Quebec was in 2020. And it crested at over 13 million hectares, so quite sizable. Right now, it looks like it's standing at about 11 million hectares, but it's been kind of trending a little bit downward the last few years. So trending downward, but also pushing more west towards the Ontario-Quebec border, which is probably more problematic for Maine than you might think, and we might have time to get into that a little bit more in a few moments. I'm really going to give a quick overview here over the next couple slides of where the program has kind of progressed through in New Brunswick through the first three phases, and some of the maybe notable changes that we've gone through. And then I'll finish up with some data that kind of speaks to where we are now and tie it in a little bit with where the state of Maine is now. Phase one of the EIS, this was a New Brunswick-centric program, and Rob talked about kind of the genesis of this program, and even when we began, if you look at the first two treatment blocks from 2014-15, you can see that they were far more blocky designs. There was more, I don't want to say archaic, but it was less sophisticated in terms of our mapping and contouring approach. But even by year 3 and year 4, as the program began to expand and populations were rising in New Brunswick, you can see that we morphed into these more contoured, I'll say, population chasing maps, and Rob spoke to that a few minutes ago as to how that works. So you can certainly see that the program grew pretty large over those first 4 years, and a big part of the success of the program was not just the treatment and the monitoring, but doing all of the outreach and all of the outlook or the communications components. With the scientists like Rob and Sarah and Veronique leading the conversation with the public about what was going on and the responsible approach to treatment and management. When we got into phase 2, which was kind of the second funding round of EIS, it became more of an Atlantic-wide approach, and this is when we started to see populations kind of drifting towards Newfoundland, and the expansion and uptake of the treatment program there. But we also saw the biggest treatment program that we had in New Brunswick in that 2018 year, and it was as a result of that mass migration that occurred in from those Quebec populations. I heard it said earlier, I can't remember who, about the 2022 decline and populations, you can see in New Brunswick that the trend had kind of, we had a decline immediately after that first migration event, and then populations kind of fluctuated over the next several years. And you can see, again, we were kind of chasing hotspots in similar areas, northwest corner of New Brunswick, adjacent to the Quebec populations, and then this kind of north central population that just kind of persisted. But the interesting thing in it is that if you overlapped all of these treatment maps year over year, you would see very, very little treatment of the same area year over year, which is another benefit that we've been able to kind of track from this program. Right now, we're in phase 3. Phase 3 is we're about halfway through it, so 2024 will be our 3rd year of treatment in this treatment block. If I was to characterize this kind of phase of the program, I would say the populations have remained low in New Brunswick and really taken off in Newfoundland. And the Newfoundland situation is very unique and different from our own, but certainly their populations in their treatment area have far exceeded anything that we've had to deal with here in New Brunswick since the start of this program. And in fact, in 2023, we treated the smallest blocks that we have in the province. We ended up treating just under 1,500 hectares, which worked out to about two plane loads of treatment over the course of a day. We've seen a small increase this year. I do apologize. I know that colored pattern probably doesn't pop out well, especially in a room like that, but we have a small treatment block that's in the northwest corner of the province, very similar to where the 2022 footprint was. And again, so a couple very small patches in that north central location. Over the course of this phase, we've really seen what I would say is a bit of a decline or a lower prioritization on our communications outreach. And a big part of that is, one, the program is very well known at this point. We're 10 years in. But the other component is that most of our treatments are occurring either on crown lands in central or very low density, low population areas where there may be a few camp leases, things of that nature, but very little of the outreach necessary to inform the public of their lands being potentially treated. Now, this next couple page maps are kind of speaking to the current situation, and again, I want to try to tie them into what you're seeing in the state of Maine. The map on the bottom left here is just, again, it's blown up version of our treatment map for this year, and it's a little bit misleading because we do chase those hot spots as Rob had shown, and this map on the right is showing where our L2 sampling was this past year. And I don't know, does my cursor show up when I'm moving it around?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll see that there's one hot spot that I'm circling right here on the panhandle just north of the state of Maine, and it doesn't show up in our treatment block, and there's a good reason for it. It's a little bit of an outlier in the sense that we don't believe that there's actually an established population there. We had one really high branch count on one branch from our sampling process, and no signs or indications of defoliation or any other populations in the area, including there's really not a great source of tree material in that area for populations to establish. So we believe that was most likely, established from a blow-in, a moth landing here from Quebec. And until we see greater signs of population, we will probably forego any treatment in that highly populated area. Our treatment block this year is about 5,000 hectares, and most of that is in that northwest corner. And so this is kind of like a 3 or 4 year trend where we've seen pretty small populations. And with the Quebec population drifting further and further west and working its way out to the end of the peninsula, we're seeing maybe less and less influence in the north central part of the province with blow-in. But towards kind of the western edge, we're probably seeing some of that influence more heavily asserted there. And that's likely what you're seeing in north and northwestern Maine. Now, speaking to two of the components that have been raised this morning, this first map on our bottom left is our aerial, or I should say our satellite defoliation map. So we do change detection as our method of determining where defoliation is occurring in the province now. We've basically taken a step back from the aerial surveys as we found this method to be a little bit more robust, and we can use it multiple times through the year. And I think Mike mentioned that the forest tent caterpillar in northeastern Maine was pretty bad this year. And this map that you're seeing, this purple or fuchsia, is actually forest tent caterpillar. And we saw far more of that this year in terms of defoliation than we did spruce budworm. There are 3 or 4 very small little spots in the central portion of the province where we've seen populations of budworm persisting for the last 4 or 5 years. And that's, amounts to about 500 hectares of moderate defoliation. That's all we've seen this year. The bigger map on the right is our pheromone trapping network. And I guess what I would highlight here is simply that our biggest count, which was a high count, was just south of where that L2 count was. And we certainly had a much stronger signal of budworm moths on that western panhandle of the province. And again, we attribute that largely to the Quebec populations influencing those numbers. Now, the next 2 slides I'm going to show you, or the next slide I'm going to show you, is less than an hour old. And it is the interpolation. So this is the L2 counts for the province of Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and the state of Maine. So this is what happens when you take all of that data of the populations and you blend it together. And this excludes any host content. So it's really just looking at where the populations are. And this is giving you a picture of what the, it says 2024 populations. It's the 2023 populations projecting forward. So you can really see that there's a huge influence of the budworm populations in the western portion of Quebec, but also there's a nice little hotspot. I say nice, apologies. There's a nice little hotspot of budworm right next door to where you're seeing your populations crop up. So this next one, I think, is just zoomed in, and again, you can see what I'm talking about here. I'm kind of tracing the state border, and you can see that your population is really heavily influenced by this Quebec population. And so, what does that mean for this upcoming season? It likely means that if there's going to be an influence or a pressure in the state of Maine for populations, you're going to see it, in this northwestern corner, and it's going to be largely, as a result of those prevailing winds potentially pushing in moths from the Quebec side. My last slide, and then I'm happy to take questions or go back to any of the slides that I've already shown. The next steps for New Brunswick, we have our treatment program, as you already saw, lined up for the season. That will likely take place early June as weather dictates. We will continue our monitoring programs as we have over the last several years. This year, we are projecting to have about 1,700 L2 sample points, which is down a little bit. And we'll continue to support whatever research efforts there happen to be in the province. A lot of them have kind of refocused to the province of Newfoundland, where populations are still quite high. But for us, we're happy to support any of the initiatives that are ongoing. So with that, I'll end, and I don't know if I've left any time for questions, but I'm happy to take them if there are any.
Thanks, Drew. That's a great presentation, and altogether gave us a lot to think about regionally and locally. Does anyone have any questions for Drew?